So I'm going to jump up on the whiteboard and I'm going to go quickly through a process, basically a process on how to launch and write a book. Let me just tell you, this is my process. You don't have to do it this way. I would highly suggest you do it something like this. During this process, I'm going to answer some questions about book publishing. Look, not only have I done it very successfully, but I've also helped a lot of people do it successfully too. Okay, so like I said, I have well over 1,200 students. We used to do events 8, 9 years ago. Me and a buddy of mine here in San Diego, we used to do events called Publish and Profit, where we would teach people in groups of 70 how to launch books, and we would actually launch their books with them in the room. We'd give them the title and the subtitle and everything. Okay, and what I'm doing this March will look something like that. Not totally. There's some subtle differences to it. But the idea is I've taught literally over 1,200 people how to write books, and they've done it. And I know the process. I know the ins and outs. And if I don't know the answer, Nicole Gephardt, who's going to be joining me here in about 15 minutes or so, does know the answer. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the process. Now, as I get into the process, what I want you to know is I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions. But as I answer some of your questions, there's going to be some new questions that are going to come up. That's one of the reasons you should stay connected to a community, okay? And so as you're getting those questions, I just told Nicole, I said, one of the things I'm really looking forward to today is answering questions. And so like right now, I see Jean, Jacqueline, Ron have already asked some questions. We're going to go through and answer as many questions as we can in the time that we have today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the process. Before I do this, let me just talk about the publishing models. It's important for me to do this before I talk about the process, because then it helps you understand the means in which you can publish a book. Now, model number one, which is the way that most people think when they think of launching a book, is what's called the traditional publishing model. So for example, if you've had a book from Simon & Schuster, or if you have a book from Random House, that is traditional publishing. You actually sell the rights of your book to a publishing house. They actually have the rights to your content, and then they distribute their content through their distribution sources, and you get a royalty. You typically get an advance. I've seen advances in $5,000, $10,000. I've seen literally friends of mine who had 7-figure advances from publishing houses. And that is a method to do that. Now, there's some benefits. The traditional publishers have access to all the bookstores. Well, everyone has access to all the bookstores, but they have a more reliable distribution network. And if you're traditionally published, you may important word, may get a little marketing help from the traditional publisher. The downsides, however, is they take a significant amount of your royalties of your book. They own the content of your book. And this is really important, they also have editorial control over the content of your book. So for example, a book like God Talks, there would have been no question about it. There would have been several key factors or stories or analogies or points inside of God Talks that they would have edited out, and I wasn't going to have that, okay? The last reason why you wouldn't do traditional publishing is they're very, very slow. And they typically want someone with a real following and a big platform. Like, for example, by the time I wrote God Talks, I think I was probably ready for a traditional publishing deal in terms of my following. Like several 100,000 people online, big email lists and everything, could do Zooms like this where we get a whole bunch of people, a lot of certified coaches, whatever. But at that point, it was kind of like I didn't need them anymore, if that makes sense. Traditional publishers are very slow. You can expect it to take about a year to get your book out. Now, model number 3 is self-publishing, which is the road historically that I've taken. When we talk about self-publishing, we're primarily talking about Amazon, not just Amazon. Barnes & Noble has a self-publishing vehicle. There's 100, literally well over 100 vehicles you could publish your book. But at this point, anywhere from 70 to 90% of the books that are sold on Amazon, which makes Amazon the 100-pound gorilla, the 500,000-pound gorilla in this space, and you optimize your book for Amazon. Now, when I talk about self-publishing, I'm talking about all the different formats, right? You've got your Kindle or your ebook, a Nook if you're doing it with same file, the same folder. I'm talking about your paperback, maybe a hardcover, and definitely an audiobook, okay? Now, that's important. If you're going to write a book, you're also going to have an audiobook, whether you choose to have an outside voice actor do it or whether you choose to do it on your own. I would suggest that you do it if you can. People, I think, prefer to hear the author. It's probably a mistake that I made in the past where I wish probably should have just read my own book. Okay, so this is self-publishing. Self-publishing, you own the rights to your book. You have control over your book. You're not going to get any marketing help, so you're going to do all the marketing, but you're probably going to do the marketing here anyway. Okay, and a lot of times what happens is people self-publish. They don't see the result that they want, and they just kind of give up. Understand that your book is the place to build a platform, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Now, there's a spot right here in the middle, which is in between traditional and self-publishing, that in the past has been called has been called hybrid publishing or niche publishing. I would just say that there's people in the middle here who will publish your book, and then based on your agreement with them, we'll take some of the royalties, we'll own some of the content, depending on how you do your agreement. Like, for example, there's companies out there that will pay you, for example, 30% of the royalties, but then they'll publish your book, and maybe you'll pay them a little bit of money. Like Nicole, we'll talk to Nicole in just a second. Nicole's model is very unique because she's a publisher. Like, she is a publisher in this zone, like an actual publisher, but you keep 100% of your content, and you keep 100% of your royalties. You literally just pay her to publish, to create and publish your book. All right, so let's talk about the process. Keep the questions coming. Like I said, in a minute, I'm going to bring in Nicole. We'll talk about the event a little bit, and then we're going to go right into Q&A. All right, so the book writing process. So it's like, the picture. You got the guy who's like, the movie Love Actually or whatever. The guy's out of the typing in his little typewriter. This like idea that the pages just start to stack up, and then you just hand the pages to the editor. Well, guess what? It does not work like that. Writing a book, I just want to let you know, the creative process, it's daunting at first. You look at it. Even now, I've written, a few good books now. Even now, I'm getting ready to write another book. Even now, it's almost like, I'm like, I don't know if I can. Like, I don't know if I have any stories to tell. The best way I can describe writing a book and thinking about your book in the beginning is like, I have 4 kids, right? So 20 years ago, I had my first daughter, and when you have this first baby, it's like love, that you never knew existed, bursts out of you, and you're like just in love with this child. And then when she was like a year and a half, my wife got pregnant again, and I remember thinking, how am I ever going to love another child like I love this child? Like, I loved this baby so much, and this other guy's going to come along, and I don't know if I have love for him, and then all of a sudden he's born, and you realize, boom, God gives you like twice the love, now you have this much love for this baby and this much love for this baby. And that's what writing a book is like. At first you write a book, and then you think, I'm going to write another book, but I don't even know if I have anything to say. And then you write the book and you're like, totally something to say. That's how you do it. Okay, so first part of the process is just your outlining or your brainstorming. Okay, and what I do is I have a big journal, and I just dump new stories, new ideas. It's no particular order. It's not putting in any sort of syntax or anything like that. I'm just pouring ideas into this new book. Okay, now as you begin to, this next book I have is I think if there's a thematic verse for the next book that I'm going to write, is where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Or Galatians 5, it says, is for freedom that you have been set free. Most of the God's people are in some form of bondage. A lot of it is religious bondage, and we're going to set them free. Okay, so get ready for that. So I'm in the brainstorming process. I'm just throwing ideas and pictures, and I've got, even this morning I had another, I'm going to tell that story, and like, I'll just put it in. And eventually I'll have like 20, 30, 40 things, and then I'll actually put it into literally like an outline. Now, this is a good a place for me to just talk about stories and humor. Okay, first things first. Is it important for you? People ask me, like, is it important to have a humor or stories in a book? Yeah, if you want to like make money, and if you want people to read it, it would be really good for you to have stories and ideally humor. Now, sometimes people are like, hey, I'm not like a particularly funny person. That doesn't matter. You can use formulas, you can use frameworks, you can use a lot of different ways to get someone to laugh inside of a book, even if you're not a naturally funny person. Okay, the second thing is about the stories. And I will go so far as to say that a really good book, is not nonfiction. I'm talking specifically nonfiction. By the way, you can use these tools for fiction books. You can come to our training if you're writing a fiction book, and probably 70-80% of it is directly applicable to you. Okay, now, when it comes to telling stories, this is, in my opinion, the most important part of the book, period. In fact, I go so far as to say this. Most people feel like their book is a series of teaching points enforced by stories or reinforced by stories. I would submit to you that your book is basically is like a series of stories that are wrapped up with a teaching point. That's how important the stories are. And if you go back into God Talks or 21 Day Miracle for that matter, what you're going to find is it's basically a book of stories. There is something magical about the storytelling process. There's something that takes us all the way back to the beginning. I'm literally like even our religious ancient texts like the Bible, especially when you go back through the entire corpus of the Bible, like people get really wrapped around the theology of the Bible, and the theology of the Bible is like really important. But it's interesting because most of the theology of the Bible comes out of stories. Like it comes out of what people did and what people did for the second time and what they said after the things that they did. Stories are that important, okay? And so I always tell people like, just start collecting your stories. And a lot of times people are like, I don't even know, like, I go like, if I sat down with you for an hour, we just had a dinner together, beer, whatever, you would just be telling me stories. I would just be telling you stories. I wouldn't be like, so let's do a hermeneutical breakdown of Galatians 5:1. Oh my gosh, you want to talk about it? I'd be like, dude, I'm sorry, I gotta run. I just got a call. So work on your stories, okay? And if you need help with that, come to the event that we're doing in March. The event we're doing in March is called Top Gun Author. We're going to be breaking down our best stuff, and I'm going to be breaking down some of the stories inside of God Talks and why they're important. By the way, like for example, one of the techniques that you'll see inside of God Talks is what's called an open loop. This one technique is how all great fiction writers get people to stay up late flipping the pages of their book. It's what creates page turners. And there's one technique inside of God Talks where there's literally a story, then another story inside of that story, then a third story inside of that story, then the third story closes, then the second story closes, then the first story closes. And most people who are reading it aren't aware of that as they're going along that journey. But what happens as you open loops inside of a story is the reader actually gets pulled into your book and they get more and more consumed by what you're writing. Okay, so that's the first part of the process is you putting together the material in your manuscript. And just so you know, sometimes people are like, oh man, I don't know, if I can do that. I don't know if I have that in me. Yeah, you do. You just need a little practice, right? Like nobody gets on the jiu-jitsu floor and does black belt the first time. Nobody gets like, into an airplane and lands on an aircraft carrier the first time. It just takes a little practice. And I really always hesitate to say that because it would be tempting for me to just be like, push this button, use this formula, do this, and you'll be successful. It just takes a little work. It just takes a little practice. But what I can tell you is that there's massive shortcuts. And I went from not knowing how to fly an airplane to landing on an aircraft carrier in 3 years. Why? Because I had great instructors. I had like a really amazing training system. And so there are shortcuts because you can leverage what other people have already figured out so you don't have to figure it out on your own like I did most of the time. Okay, so that's the first one. Second part of the process is to write. Okay, now, best thing I can say about the writing process is it is messy, okay? It's really common when you write to be like, what was that? Oh my goodness. Like my first, second, third chapter when I write, every book I wrote, I remember the first, second chapter, I'm like, this book is horrible. It's just part of the process. And writing is messy. My only advice in the writing, and it's not my only advice, but my best advice is to write and not edit. A lot of people write and edit at the same time. They fix sentences while they're writing. Just write. I type like a chicken on amphetamines, okay? I got all kinds of green and red lines all over my thing. Grammarly, after about a chapter, Grammarly, I had this happen with God Talks like 8 times. Grammarly just froze. Grammarly was like, oh my gosh, I can't do it anymore, and like went to the bar. And so I had to reboot Grammarly 8 times during God Talks because Grammarly was like, I don't even want to talk to this guy anymore, okay? So the writing is, just give yourself permission. I would just say like, give yourself permission to write kind of a crappy first draft, okay? Just to get to a first draft because you're going to edit. You're going to add things. You're going to change things. You're going to add some stories. You're going to pull some things out, okay? Editing. Now, I'm going to move quick because I'm going to bring Nicole in. Nicole, you're coming in about 5-7 minutes, okay? And we'll talk, you and I, for maybe 7-10 minutes, and then we'll talk about the event, and then we'll open up a big Q&A. Editing. Most people believe that they ought to hire one editor. And most people are wrong. You actually want to hire at least 3 editors. I would make that 4 editors if you include the most important editor, which is you. Okay, you're going to have you editing. You're going to have what's called a manuscript, or sorry, a developmental or a content editor. That's not the person who like puts periods and fixes your grammar. That's the person who reads your entire book and goes, "Hey Ed, what happened with chapter 8?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What happened with chapter 8?" And my developmental editor goes, "Well, it looked like you just got bored with the chapter and then just stopped writing." I go, "Well, that's probably because I got bored with the chapter and stopped writing." And she said, "Well, could you finish the chapter?" And I'm like, "Fine, I'll finish the chapter." And so a developmental editor would be like, "I love this story, but I think it should go here." And that happened to me a few times. That's developmental. Then you've got a manuscript editor, underlines, periods, dots. Then you have a proofreader who comes in at the end. All right, then you're going to publish your book. When you publish the book, you're going to publish in it at least 3 formats: Kindle, paperback, audiobook. You can also publish it as a hardcover if you want to, and then you're potentially going to get it translated into different languages. I would suggest if you're going to do that, start with Spanish because every state in the United States, the second most common language is Spanish, except for Minnesota. Minnesota's German. What's up with that, Minnesota? Hey, pasa, Minnesota. So you're going to potentially do it in languages. You'll do that as you get along the way. By the way, how you publish your book, what's written on your page on Amazon is important. What kind of graphics you have on your page are important. It's called A+ content. All that stuff is important to the book. Your endorsements, who promotes it, all that other stuff. That's really, really important. And the last thing you're going to do is promote your book. Now, I'm going to give you one secret here. There's probably 10 secrets. I'm going to teach all this stuff at the event. But the one very important secret I'm going to give you is this one. It's OPL. The secret to getting a book into the stratosphere is OPL. The secret to getting to bestseller status is OPL. The secret to getting 1,500 reviews, like my book 21 Day Miracle has almost 1,500 reviews, like 1,450. 1,450. God Talks has almost 500 reviews. To get that many reviews, one of the secrets is OPL, okay? And OPL stands for Other People's Lists. Other People's List. I went on the Glenn Beck show, had 500 books sold in a few days and probably 1,000 over the course of a week. I was on Sid Roth. We sold several thousand copies of the book. I was on 700 Club. We sold several thousand copies of the book. I was on Chris Fountain's interview. And we sold hundreds of books. Like literally, those are the kind of things that you want. Even somebody simply posting you on their social media will make a really big difference, especially when people start seeing you in multiple places. Most people think, I'm just going to put my book up on Amazon. It's going to sell like millions of copies. And gosh, I hope that's true for you. I really, really do. But if you look back in the history of great books, even like The Martian, Harry Potter, great nonfiction book series like Chicken Soup for the Soul, Good to Great, all of John Maxwell's books, they started because that author leveraged other people's lists. Okay, so there's a place to start.